So, welcome to our second video discussing the upcoming Dungeons & Dragons movie, Honor Among Thieves. Our first video, which you haven't seen yet, please check it out, was about the trailer itself and our thoughts on that. Whereas this is going to be more along the lines of what we believe would make for a successful Dungeons & Dragons movie, what the goals should be,
what defines success,
what defines, more just as a thought, more the D&D movie as a thought exercise or concept. What would be the best way to define it and go about it? It would have been nice to make this before the trailer, because I didn't expect the trailer to come out. I was hoping to make this video probably shortly after Gen Con. But, life, it is what it is. So here we are. Obviously the trailer is going to influence what we're going to say here, because we've all seen it at this point. So, over a year ago, information was released that had a few tidbits here and there, mainly the cast, which at the time it was known as going to be Chris Pine, presumably as the lead at the time.
Michelle
Rodriguez, and Hugh Grant, and the assumption most people made was that Hugh Grant was probably going to be the villain. So far the trailer has not dissuaded me from any of those things, so I'm going with the assumption that that's the case. It takes place in the Forgotten Realms, and it sounded like from the description given at the time that it was going to be a spin-off of the Dragon Heist adventure. It's been over a year since I read the article, and I don't remember exactly what in there gave me that impression, but I was not alone in that impression, so I'm going to assume that was intentional. So that was what was known approximately a year ago, and I've had other discussions online, in person, about what does success look like here. And I think that would be one of the places you'd want to start with any kind of discussion on a hypothetical Dungeons & Dragons movie, which is becoming less hypothetical by the day. So, to my mind, Paramount is obviously intending on making a franchise.
That's the impression I get.
Yeah, you don't want to pour these kind of resources into a one-off. Similarly, I think there's an approximately 0% chance that a primary goal of this is to get more people to play Dungeons & Dragons, because in a cost-benefit analysis, that will never work. You don't spend $80 million to maybe make $5 million on the other end. That's just not a thing. Now,
you do take that you count that into the equation.
Yeah, but from Paramount's perspective, they don't care. They're not going to see any of it.
And I would not say higher sales for the game would mean success for the movie.
Yeah, but to a point that you made when we were kind of talking about this earlier, merchandising from the movie, obviously, that's a different story. There Paramount is going to see money, action figures. I'm assuming that we will have some movie edition of a box set for the game at some point. That probably
there'll probably be a supplement.
Now, do we know for sure that? So I recognize that it normally wouldn't be that way, but if I'm Paramount and I want to make this movie to make money off this movie like Paramount does, and off the merchandising and stuff, but I also recognize that Wizards of the Coast, Dungeons & Dragons in general, wants to use this as a big old commercial. So are we sure?
They hopefully would. In general, the way it would work is Paramount is paying them a lot of money to use the license. That's where Wizards of the Coast is making their money on this.
Yeah,
right, for sure. That's exactly my point. So if I'm Paramount and I'm paying them lots of money for the licensing of it, and for the licensing of the merchandising and stuff like that, I'm also going to want to get a piece of the game sales that happen for some period after the movie, like even just for 6 months after the movie's released.
Yeah,
but they're not entitled to that.
I didn't say they were entitled to it. I said I would ask for it.
That's a thing that we can speculate on. And if I were to speculate, I would say that Hasbro probably told them that there's no chance that's going to happen.
Right, but from your argument of Hasbro or Paramount's not, whoever's not going to make an $80 million film to make $5 million profit off the game. If you're Hasbro or whoever who's selling the licensing for this movie, if you recognize there's only $5 million and it's going to stop you from getting all the licensing money and money from your cut of the merchandising, then why wouldn't you just be like, yeah, sure, we'll give you $2 million of that $5 million? I'm not even saying it's in there. I'm just saying it's
even
irrelevant
if
anyway.
Paramount
I mean, you know what?
would get a portion of the proceeds of D&D afterwards, they're not going to take that as a sign the movie was successful.
I didn't say
Right.
that. I said it's part of the equation.
That's
I wouldn't even make it part of the equation.
No,
Okay, fair.
I see what you're saying, Brett. Just a moment here. I believe with something like that, the way that they would typically try to do it, based on other movies I've seen like this, which this is a fairly unique situation, so there's not a lot to go on, but I believe what would happen is Paramount would receive part of the sales if they made like a movie edition of the game, is how they would do it.
Oh, I totally understand. I understand exactly what you're saying. I mean, if they straight up did Icewind Dale and then Icewind Dale sales went up, I get that. And I don't even know what made me think of. You just said that they're not doing it that way. I said, "Are you sure?" I just thought, "Are you sure?" I mean, if I was Hasbro or if I was Paramount, I want to get in on that. So it's all irrelevant. I don't even know if we could find out about that. It was just a thought that I had.
Yep.
It isn't by no means important to me. I was just curious about it.
No, you do raise a good point. Like whenever I say that, I'm saying if I were in their position, I do not know this to be a fact. I just my overarching point was that if I'm Paramount, my primary concern is the box office. My secondary concern is merchandising, and the existing thing. To me, the reason why I don't think it would be a concern is because the market's so small. Because even if there is a bump, which I expect there to be a bump, but I don't know how big it's going to be. It's definitely not going to like double or triple the market size, and you're already talking about something that, yeah, it brings in money, but it doesn't bring in, just hand over fist kind of money. It's not quite the printing press that Magic the Gathering is, although it's getting closer by the day, from what I understand. And it is one of Hasbro's bigger parts now. So I don't know. I could be mistaken on that. I just meant, in scale of the money and effort to do all this for what I perceive to be just the tiniest of bumps over here. There's just no way that the cost benefit analysis works out. So.
And the better deal for Paramount would actually be, hey, can we get a discount on the license fee instead of proceeds from the game that come after this?
Well, that's all metrics that
Yeah.
that people would have to look into and find out. I just felt that was one thing that should go into the equation. That's all. We've spent now 20 minutes on something that I thought was a throwaway. So
That's okay.
my bad.
A lot of things
that's
that
fine.
people think are throwaways, it's actually not a bad thought and not something bad to talk about.
Oh, I didn't think it was a bad thought. I'm genius. Just maybe wasting 20 minutes on it now.
No. I just, like I said, my primary point was that, like, if you make a Super Mario Brothers movie, no one's making that with an eye to increasing sales to Super Mario Brothers.
I feel like you're wrong. I'm sure that that's not their main goal, but I will guarantee you there's someone with an abacus somewhere that is putting that in the equation.
At Nintendo, yes, but not at whatever studio is producing the movie.
Well, I bet you're wrong again. I bet there people with jobs like that. It's their job to maximize income, maximize ROI, and to do that, they're going to think of every possible way they could. And if they could, so what if it's 1% of their total take? They're going to take it because they're greedy. That's what people with money do. That's what big business is, using every ounce of resource to make every penny of ROI.
No, sure. I mean, I get that. I'm just I'm of the opinion, based on the few things I've ever read about licensing agreements, which admittedly is not a lot, that the company making the movie is never going to see a cent of any of that other stuff.
I agree wholeheartedly, and 100% true. This is just a different deal. This is a new thing. It right.
Right. But the reason I even go down that path is because that, I believe, leads into what kind of movie do you make. And when you adapt a game, I have encountered a surprising number of people that feel that you should go the Jumanji route, which I feel is foolhardy in the extreme, because it will completely fail. Everything has to work perfectly, and even when it does, you just get called a Jumanji clone.
Yep.
Which you will be. Because, like, whenever you adapt a book, you don't show someone reading the book. You know, you adapt the story. And so I think that really plays into the type of movie you make. And so the less you make it about the game, the more you make it about the setting, you know, things like that. I think that's the money for the IP. Because the other problem, in my opinion, with trying to model it after the game is our home game that we're running is different than any home games you're running, that people at Wizards of the Coast run, that someone over here runs, that the Critical Role runs. The only commonality is the worlds and the rules to an extent.
Not even the worlds.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, if two people playing the Forgotten Realms, like, they do have the same backstory, depending on what all they stick with, obviously. You know, I'm saying that's the only hope of commonality that you have.
Yeah, like on the other people I play with, we swap GMs every now and then. Every few months, we cycle out. For no one gets burnt out. Every person that runs it, even if it's the same world, runs differently. It's a different story. It's a different game.
He's not talking about the
much.
story. He's talking about the Forgotten Realms. Or Greyhawk.
But you
or
don't
Spelljammer.
want it going from the view of someone being taken from the real world, suddenly finding themselves in Forgotten Realms.
No, that's the Jumanji thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, it won't work.
No,
I won't see anything from my Tuesday group in the movie. So,
Right. And I'm actually trying to probably make both points at the same time, in that you've got the Forgotten Realms as established by source books, novels. You know, there is a canon to the Forgotten Realms. At the same time, your home game probably doesn't follow that canon 100%, because the moment you start playing, you're changing things, and so you can't base it off that, because that's different for everybody. So it to my mind, it needs to be off the common thing. Now, the experience over here, that might be worth trying to capture. But again, you're running into everyone's experience is different. But the kinds of themes you're going to run into, teamwork, coming together, overcoming adversity, things like that. Those need to be themes in the movie for it to be successful, because those are common storytelling devices. But those are also common things that occur in home games, because that's what it's all about. Camaraderie and friendship and all that. The story part. The rest. At the end of the day, the monsters, the setting, that's window dressing. The story has to work. Because if the story doesn't work, no one's going to buy into anything else. It'll look pretty, but no one's going to care. They'll be like, okay, I didn't completely waste my $10 watching this. But I'm not going to buy the DVD, probably. I'm not going to buy the toys. I'm not emotionally invested if a sequel comes out, So, to me, the story has to come first, because ultimately the movie has to be successful. No matter what the goal of it is, it has to be successful. So there has to be a story to work with. It can't just be a bunch of jokes that people feel are universal, but I really don't think they're anywhere near as universal as everyone thinks they are. Like, I hear, okay, like the halfling barbarian thing. Some people think that is the funniest damn thing they've ever heard of. Once you hear about it twice, it's no longer the funniest thing you've ever heard of, and becomes just mind-numbingly stupid by about the fifth time.
I don't find the Halfling Barbarian funny. I don't. I find it interesting.
I didn't say you did.
I've thrown the idea at you before, but
As have I.
But
Separately,
I
independently.
find it an interesting concept. But yes, they're not. It's not a universal joke.
Right, but there are some people that literally do think that that's like the height of comedy, and they think that's what a D&D movie is going to be filled with. And I'm saying that's a disaster. You know, if you reference that video that you might still be able to find on the internet, the people playing, drinking Mountain Dew and Doritos, and you know, I walk into the darkness, you're attacked, I blast the darkness. You know, it's funny the first time you watch it. That's not going to be funny in an $80 million Hollywood movie. Most of the audience is going to think that's the dumbest thing they've ever seen. They're not going to get the jokes. Okay, so you cannot build towards the concept of most of your audiences play D&D.
There can definitely not be any inside jokes.
Well, there can be. I think there can be some. Like,
Well, okay, there can't. Okay, so you can't hitch your wagon to the
yes,
inside
yes,
jokes.
that's what I'm trying to say. That cannot be the core of your thing here, which also means that if it's going to be a comedy, and it can be, okay, I personally think comedies in general are very risky, and are the movies that are dated the fastest over any type of movie. But competently written comedies last forever. I mean, the airplane movies are hilarious still.
I would be disappointed if this was a comedy,
Yeah,
as opposed to a serious movie with comedic
comedic tones,
Okay.
touches.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's what I'm hoping it is. I'm just saying it could be a comedy and succeed, but I think you're starting behind the eight ball when you do that, because if you're starting there, your natural inclination is going to be to joke about the things in the movie. Obviously, well, what's in the movie? The traps, the monsters, the villains. Well, if there's no stakes, you know, no excitement, no nothing. Again, you come out of the theater, that's kind of funny. I don't care if they ever make a sequel. I don't care about these characters, you know. Whereas, you know, any movie, you know, could use moments of levity, unless it's like Schindler's List or something. You know, serious moments can't have levity. I think current movies look and they see the success of the Marvel movies, and they don't know that there's a growing number of people that really don't like the fact that a number of Marvel movies don't allow you to have any serious moment last for more than 10 seconds before someone cracks a joke. That's going to be a problem for them going forward. And you can already see it in the reviews for the last Thor movie. And having seen it, I see what people are saying. Like, I kind of agree. So I'm hoping that's not the way they go. I'm hoping it's the characters within the movie clearly take it seriously, but where appropriate, you know, levity. There is such a thing as gallows humor. You know, if you find yourself in absurd situations, of course you're going to crack a joke to try to break the ice. You know, like, you know, people do it in the real world.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Not so much about this movie in particular, but about your statement of
It's the Marvel movies.
so for those of you, I had COVID and I'm still suffering from long COVID, so I lose things in my head. There's like somebody's name on the tip of my tongue, I just can't get it. So this is what has just happened now. There was something that I thought was very important to clarify, and I can't even begin to remember what it is right now. So
Go ahead and stop me like while I say it. If I say something like that,
I was really just letting you finish your sentence and still lost it.
But yeah, I guess my big point is that in my personal opinion, comedy can easily work. Comedies obviously do succeed. You know, I like a number of comedies. So don't think I'm one of these people that's like, oh, you got to stick up his ass and don't like comedies. No, comedies that are well written are funny. They're very funny.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I got it.
Okay.
So, how sure? Now, this isn't about this movie in particular, although it applies to this movie. When you say you read things where people don't like this, and first of all, I agree with the way the Marvel movies have been getting more and more slapsticky, and they're by less and less entertaining for me. Not that I don't like slapstick, but in that movie. But so you're reading these things. Is there a chance that is this widespread? I mean, the echo chamber that you're reading them in, is this a small number of people who feel this way and keep repeating it, or is this 70% of the movie watching populace?
Well,
And that's an honest question, not me trying to.
right. And that's a fair question. I go to a few sites that still have message boards where people talk because the Internet Movie Database decided to nuke theirs about 10 years ago. Probably one of the most tragic things to ever happen to the Internet. Aside from the loss of Purple.com, which was just a scrolling page of purple. Now the people that make the mattresses own it. But the places I go, if the primary site does, in my opinion, have a broad diversity of opinion. It doesn't have as many people on it as it used to, unfortunately. But in this particular instance, I also look to reviews on YouTube. And this has been commentary that's been running since, I believe, before Infinity War. Since at least Thor Ragnarok, in fact. In fact, that was the one that kind of touched it off.
Because you understand what I'm saying.
Right. It could be
10% of the movie watching populace
of really loud
who's just
people.
really loud and squeaky wheeling it.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, and I hate to say this because it's an artistic endeavor, which means there is no such thing as an objective statement about its quality.
It's all subjective.
It's all subjective. The only objective thing we actually have is ticket sales. Ticket sales do not equal quality, but ticket sales do tell you how many people watch the movies.
Yep.
And the latest Thor movie has been doing well at the box office. So enough people still are okay with it.
Do we have enough data post-pandemic, some movies don't even go to the theater anymore, you know what I mean? Although
Right.
the big movie makers would want all of their movies to go to the theater, obviously. But do we have enough data to suggest whether or not post-pandemic numbers, calculations are different than pre-pandemic?
That is an excellent question. I don't have a solid answer on that, to be totally honest. I personally, from the few movies I've looked at, by and large, numbers are down because people
Right.
going are down.
I'm just saying, does the equation need to be changed? Are the variables different now, pre and post-pandemic?
Part of me says that it almost has to be. The other part of me says the latest Top Gun movie is the highest grossing movie Paramount's ever released.
Right.
And so, like, it has beaten Titanic.
Right. So my only question is, if there would never have been a pandemic, would it have even done more?
That's possible.
I mean, are there people now that don't go to the theaters anymore because they got used to watching it at home and realized that it's a lot cheaper not buying $6 popcorn?
Yeah, there definitely are.
Did they just go out and buy a bigger TV? You
Right.
know?
Yeah, there definitely are. I don't know. I don't know any kind of percentages or anything about that, but there definitely are. I know people like that, so they definitely do exist. There were definitely movies I didn't go watch, and I've been going back to the theater for, I believe, over a year now. And there were movies I didn't go watch because I couldn't convince other people to go watch them. And I'm, to be a little statement here, I really hate going to watch movies by myself. I believe I've done it exactly twice. Not gonna go into which movies they were. No, they weren't dirty movies.
Mm-hmm.
I smell those. So that's
All right, fine. One was The Phantom Menace. Yes, that Phantom Menace. And it was like the 7th time I saw it in the theater. So yeah, that's what not having a franchise for 20 years will do to you.
Not the Phantom Men in Lace.
No, not that.
No?
No, haven't seen that one.
Different movie.
I would assume so. The other was Alien Resurrection. So, because I went with...
We went to an alien movie.
We went to go watch Prometheus.
That's the one.
Yeah. Yeah, Prometheus. Yeah,
And one of the Batmans. The last Batman, because we watched all 3 Batmans.
Yeah.
At the IMAX. One.
Yeah. Yeah,
Not the last Batman. The last Christian Bale. Batman.
The theater relatively close to us had all 3 of the Christian Bale movies. It was the third one, The Dark Knight Rises, came out at midnight. So the other 2 played, and then midnight that one played, and they were all in IMAX. So we got to see the IMAX exclusive scenes for The Dark Knight. It's the Hong Kong scenes. If you've never seen them, like, they are spectacular in IMAX. But yeah, also did the same thing with the first Avengers movie in tomorrow. The movies leading up to it, and then at midnight, the first Avengers movie. Which, by the way, you would think for like, was it 6 movies?
6 or 12 or something.
It's
a lot.
It's 2 Iron Men, the Hulk, Thor, and Captain America, then Avengers. So 6, counting Avengers. They went by a lot faster than you would think, especially for movies that you've already seen. Literally, the only one to me that was even kind of slow was the first Iron Man, and it wasn't slow. It was just, hey, I've been here, I've seen this. But like, once it goes, we just blew right through it. I was kind of amazed, in fact.
That is kind of amazing.
So,
So what else about the
anyway,
macro
right,
of this
anyway.
Dungeons and Dragons movie and how it affects the universe?
Right. So, again, I'm operating under the assumption that they want to make more of these movies. So that's another reason why going the comedic route, I think, is total suicide, because that sets the tone for all the others. You're just not going to be able to sustain it. Okay.
You talking comedy or
Comedy.
All right.
Not. There are jokes present. That's fine. I expect that. This isn't 2001, where I don't think there were any jokes in that movie.
Nope.
So, folks, I've referenced that movie a few times now. You should go watch it if you haven't. But just be ready. Have some coffee or something. It's kind of slow.
It is really slow.
So anyway, so towards that effort, then, like I said, in my opinion, the best way would be to focus on one of the settings, or create your own for the movies. But I would go with one of the pre-established ones so you have material to work with. Because again, I'm of the opinion, if someone else has already laid the groundwork for you, take advantage of it. The more you have to create yourself, the greater chance you're going to screw it up.
Well, not only that, but you leave your time and efforts for other things that might give it more depth or more scope or whatever.
Right. So, it didn't have to be the Forgotten Realms. It could have been Oerth from Greyhawk. It could have been Dark Sun.
Ravenloft.
Could have been Ravenloft. Could have been
Dragonlance.
Dragonlance. Could have been Eberron.
Spelljammer.
Could have been Spelljammer.
We're gonna get dragons in space before long, or hamsters in space.
Yeah,
before long.
yeah. If this all works out, and they do actually take off with this, the Spelljammer movie, that will be this set of movies, Guardians of the Galaxy movie, the bizarro, wacky space movie that hopefully opens up all kinds of other options at the same time. So yeah, it could have been any one of those. Although I would have, had it been me, I would have either gone for Forgotten Realms, Greyhawk, or Dragonlance, because a big problem that a lot of these movies could potentially face is suspension of disbelief or audience buy-in. You can only push things so far before you break and you lose the audience. And I think the other settings, starting there would have been a mistake.
What? Dark Sun?
Yeah.
Will break suspension of disbelief?
Well, you tell people Dungeons and Dragons. Most people think, that have never played the game, they immediately equate it to you're basically playing out Lord of the Rings. Okay? That's what they
Yeah.
expect.
Or Dritz at the very
Yeah, your stock fantasy setting. They want, castles, dragons, knights. That's what they expect. You go into Dark Sun, it's a post-apocalyptic, sun-blasted wasteland where
Mad Max
metal is uncommon.
meets Lord of the Rings, pretty much.
Yeah. Now that would be an awesome movie that will never launch a franchise. Or maybe it might launch a Dark Sun franchise, but that will not launch a D&D franchise.
I think they did it right with Forgotten Realms.
Yeah.
And specifically the Sword Coast.
Yeah, that's easily the most developed part of the setting. And likewise with
And the one that the people they're most familiar with, I'm sure.
yeah, and Eberron. Eberron's tricky. Eberron might have been able to work. To me, the problem with Eberron is it's closer to what people call steampunk. With it's kind of like if Magic and the other settings were honest, it would be everywhere like it is in Eberron. And again, I think you can build up to that. I don't think you could jump into that. I think it's, I'm not trying to say the audience is stupid, but I think it's too fantastic.
So what you're saying is Honor Among Thieves is entry level.
Yeah.
And you hope that they use that as a stepping stone,
Right.
a rung, as it were, to climb to greater and higher heights.
Yes. Based on what we've seen from the trailers, it looks like a stock fantasy setting. Trailer, I should say, just one of it. There's the D&D creatures we expect. The architecture looks to be what I would envision Realms architecture to look like, based on the few things we saw. There's some kind of big underground dungeon with lava. It's checking all the boxes on the tropes. Okay, now it's just going to come down to the story, the acting, and connecting to other things, hopefully.
And the reason I'm optimistic is because they went out of their way to hire decent actors.
Yeah.
At least for some of the parts.
Yeah.
Right? They're people that they're bankable commodities, they're people that we have seen execute blockbuster movies before. They've also shown layers and depth in other movies, and it's so I'm optimistic about that.
Yeah.
They started in the right spot, more optimism. There's just a hint of comedy, which to me is more an ode to Chris Pine being a bard and charismatic than it is to any desire to be Mel Brooks.
Yeah.
Of course, they.
Because no one else is Mel Brooks.
I mean, that's fair too. But I don't think that they're. I mean, obviously, the comedy is a strategic play. They've seen it work in Marvel, as expressed earlier, and I think they want to get a little piece of that. And obviously, it's strategic, but it does work very well with Chris Pine being a bard and charismatic, and just the funny little interplay. Like in the one scene you see with he and the barbarian, where they decide that there's something they need to rectify the wrong that they started, but maybe they should go have drinks first.
Yeah.
Just that little interplay between them. It's what you see with people when they are together a lot. I do it with Bobby and Chad here in these videos and without. So if you're with 4 or 5 people and you're running around and hacking and slashing and being hacked and slashed upon, and there's drama and there's fear and there's love and laughter, there's going to be times when you guys are funny with each other, and I think that that's honest to put into the movie, and I'm glad it's there.
Yeah. I'd back that. But if I may take a step back just for a moment on the concept of the audience buy-in.
Mm-hmm.
Just to, in case anyone doesn't quite get what I'm getting at, to elaborate, to use the Marvel movies as the metaphor, because I think they're actually the perfect metaphor here. the starting Marvel movie was the first Iron Man movie. Now, the only fantastical thing in that movie is the suit and the reactor. The rest of it is the real world. Now, physics don't work at all with the Iron Man suit. We'll ignore that, but it's the singular fantastical thing. Beyond that, Tony's dealing with a business rival, government contracts. I mean, he's running a company. Like, these are real world concerns.
A
Like
hostile takeover.
it's grounded in a reality that we all can understand with this lone fantastic element. And then the second movie was the Incredible Hulk, and again, it's the Hulk is the fantastic element, but it begins to go beyond that. It introduces the Abomination. Begins to introduce the leader, although they're not gone anywhere with him yet. Maybe he'll show up in She-Hulk. I haven't read spoilers. But also, the weapons the military used were Stark weapons, because they're in that world. And then Stark shows up at the end of the movie to kind of begin to tie it together. And then you had Iron Man 2, where we go a little bit farther. Stark's had the armor now. He's made more versions. Villains are starting to try to make their versions. One succeeds. The world is beginning to change to become less and less like ours. And then you hit Thor, where it's space magic. But you've been prepped for that.
Okay. There was a gradient, a stepping up, a ramping up of all things weird.
Right, you've been prepped for that. And then and then you have Captain America, which is against the backdrop of something we know about, World War II, but an element of the space magic introduced in Thor. And we see Hydra, and how again we're departing from the real world, but only ever so slightly. And then finally in the Avengers, to me, the scene that just drives it all home, that showed that Marvel was all in on this, is the helicarrier scene. Because it's a thing that if you're not a Marvel reader, you don't expect it. They didn't have to put it in the movie for any reason whatsoever, but they did, because it's a thing in the comics, because their cinematic universe is becoming more like the comic universe. And so the fact that it just happens, by that point, you're like, sure, why not a flying aircraft carrier? That makes perfect sense in this world. I mean, we've got a guy in an armored suit, a space Viking, a giant green guy, a guy from World War II. Like, of course, that's the kind of thing that would exist here, and then all those steps. Then you take more and more until finally, an 8-foot tall purple guy gets a bunch of magic space rocks and wipes out half the life in the universe with a snap of his fingers. It makes sense that could happen by that point.
Also, not necessarily a bad idea.
Because we've let's debate for another time. Because we've gotten, we've built up to that. Okay, so now Dungeons and Dragons does have the disadvantage that it's going to start with a fantastical setting, but you know that going in because it's Dungeons and Dragons.
And that is an advantage in that you don't need to build it up to that. That
Right.
just is.
But the important part is knowing where the line is, and I personally don't know where the line is, but the people making the movie need to know that there is a line beyond which you're going to lose the audience. Up to that point, they're going to be like, all right, this works, but there's that something out there that you could go too far, and they're like, no, this is just stupid. This makes no sense. Okay, so there just has to be, even though you're dealing with the fantastical, it still has to have some logic through line to make it make
So that's what I was
sense.
going to say. You can go too far, so long as there's a thread of logic behind it that gets you there.
Yeah.
Like you come up with some bit of magic that's never been in a D&D source book before. So long as there's a logical from here to there to get there.
Yeah, to be clear, whenever I say too far, I don't mean something that doesn't presently exist in canon. No, it can only exist in the movie. That's perfectly fine, as long as it makes sense within the structure of the movie.
The structure of the rules that you have made.
Right. Again, using another movie as an example of what not to do, to my mind, is the first Suicide Squad movie. The end of that movie makes no sense at all. Like, things just happen because they happen. Like, there's all kinds of things that just have no logical through line to them. And we just have to accept that whatever's happening is happening, and that's one reason why people seriously do not like that movie. Whereas its sequel...
The people in your echo chamber?
Other people in my other echo chambers, not just the one.
Yeah, fair enough.
Whereas its sequel is every bit as absurd, but you're led from A to B to C to D to make it make sense by the time you get to a giant starfish wrecking a fictional Hispanic island in the end. And the character's actually giving a crap and defying Amanda Waller. Like, the things make sense, even though they're utterly illogical to the real world.
A
It makes sense within the
giant starfish
Yeah.
from space.
Yes, from space.
They can
Giant.
control people.
They can control people.
That has mind control capabilities.
Yeah. Well, control their corpses anyway.
Yeah,
in the
fair.
movie.
Okay.
That's not canon to the comics as I understand it, because I've seen all kinds of versions of the heroes with the stars on them, and they're not dead. So I'm assuming that's not how it works in the comics. But I primarily read Marvel, so I couldn't tell you. So yeah, that's just two examples of how to do it and how not to do it, and hopefully they're paying attention to Marvel, which they should be, because Marvel's succeeding. DC is a burning train wreck.
If you're going to take a, what is that, computerized learning school classroom project thing,
Like deep learning or something.
it's a thing. You can take like anything, learn how to do anything.
Yeah.
What is that called?
I don't know, but conceptually I understand what I think you're getting at.
I don't remember what I was going to say now. My brain sucks.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say what you were going to say is, would you look at the successful option or the unsuccessful option?
Right. If you were going to put those things, what is the name of that learning tool software thing? You can go and take classes about anything. Like, we could go in there and put in a class on how to play Waterdeep, and people pay us to watch that.
Oh, yeah. Wow, I know exactly what you're talking about now. Where we create the classes and put them up there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is that?
I don't know.
For a while, it was on every video on YouTube they were
Yeah.
advertising on.
I know exactly what you're talking about, but I cannot think of the name of it.
Okay, well, that thing that I'm thinking about that I can't remember what the name of it is.
It's online courses that you create and put up,
Yeah,
people pay for.
for sure. So DC puts one up on how to make a successful movie franchise, and Marvel puts one up. Even if the Marvel one's $100 and the DC one's $10, I'm probably putting out the $100 on Marvel.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're going to
So Dungeons and Dragons is going to look at those movies and decide how to do it.
Right, yeah. If you're going to copy someone, you copy success. You don't copy failure. Like, yeah.
Skillshare.
Yeah, that's it.
Skillshare. Which is not a sponsor of this show, which is good because they would probably fire us because I can't think of the name of it.
I don't know. Like, we built up anticipation of what it would finally be.
All right, Skillshare, pay us. Just not for the view. Not by the view quite yet.
Yeah, no. Total side note on the concept of anticipation, by the way. This is a movie thing here, folks. From what I understand from filmmaking, comedy and horror are the two most closely related genres.
For sure.
Because they both center around the buildup of anticipation and the resolution. It's just one is a laugh, one's a knife to the face, you know, which is also why you find so much crossover of comedy into horror.
Well, not only that, but even back in the day, like Greek theater, you know, the masks. One was a smiling and one was
Yeah.
Those are the two sides of acting.
So, little note there for cinephiles out there.
Sounds dirty.
I didn't invent the word. No, I mean, so yeah, little note. So, kind of like horror movies, so, and John Carpenter movies. A lot of overlap in that category, by the way.
There's a little bit of overlap there.
He's got a little bit of comedy as well.
I laughed several
Vampires.
times during the thing.
I would never call vampires a comedy.
Kurt Russell made me laugh a couple times.
It has plenty of gallows humor in it. I'll definitely give it that. Vampires, in my opinion, John Carpenter's Vampires, to be clear on what movie I'm talking about, with James Woods and not Alec Baldwin, but the other one that looks just like him but fatter.
Stephen, Billy,
I think it's
Daniel.
It's one of them.
Okay.
Anyway, looks just like Alec Baldwin. He looks like how Alec Baldwin looks now. Well, he looked like that back in the 90s, okay, but with black hair. So hopefully
That's Daniel, I believe.
Yeah, I think so. I think Steven's the one that does
It is Daniel Baldwin.
Right. He's
That
got
was
his
in
red
it.
hair or blonde hair.
Yeah,
But
Bill,
anyway.
Billy's the one that looks like young Alec Baldwin.
Yeah. So anyway, they're both in the movie. I think the guy who's the bad guy in the black hole is the main villain.
What movie are you talking about?
John Carpenter's Vampires.
Oh,
The Cardinal.
yeah.
Wasn't he the bad guy in the black hole? The weirdo Disney movie from the 70s.
Tom
that
Cruise,
everyone's
no.
That
talking
movie
about.
is great.
Stay away from the Event Horizon.
Yeah. But anyway,
Another good movie, by the way.
yeah, definitely.
Event Horizon, that is. Lawrence Fishburne.
I view John Carpenter's Vampires as a Western
For sure.
/ horror, you know, because number one, it's in the Southwest, but also like it literally is the plot to a Western, you know, just with vampires. So, and much better than Blood Rain 2, which was also a Western with vampires. It's just, that was terrible.
What you got there, Chad?
really terrible.
He was in the black hole.
Yeah, it's Max Schnell, right?
Maximilian Schnell. Shell.
But yeah, so a little tidbit: totally avoid Blood Rain 2 and 3 and 1. They're all bad. Like basically every movie Uwe Boll's ever made is absolutely terrible, except for Tunnel Rats. That was at least acceptable, but that's not based on a video game. That's just what tunnel fighting in Vietnam was like.
But back to Chris Pine and Dragons.
Yeah. No, we've gone off the cliff over here on our talk. Back to D&D.
We do that sometimes.
I hear that's what the people want.
I mean,
Give the people what they want. Bob.
authenticity.
Right. Authenticity.
We gotta be we.
This is what it looks like.
It's almost like we're just wandering wanderers all over the place.
Well played, Chad. Well played. Like I said, there are mixed opinions on this channel. So, yeah. So anyway, I think these are all things that have to be taken into consideration. Also, obviously, if you have an eye towards making future movies, you need to do world building in your movie. Now, that doesn't have to be, you know, introducing characters that are just going to wander off and we hopefully will pick them up in a sequel. You know, in the case of Dungeons & Dragons and the Forgotten Realms in particular, it can be as simple as just talking about the other places in the Forgotten Realms. You know, one of the characters will be like, oh, you've been to such and, you know, you've been to Rashomon? Oh, yeah.
You've been all the way up to 10 pounds?
Yeah, you know, up and down the Sword Coast, you know, wherever. You know, just, it can be
You've been
bar,
to the Border Kingdoms?
It can be bar talk in the background. It can be wanted posters on the is it broadsheets? Is that what they call them?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, obviously we see the Thayans in it, or what we're assuming so far, the Thayans. So, you know, I
Totally
assume
the Thayans.
I assume there will be talk of probably Zaz Tam, assuming he's not the actual villain, and the Zulkirs, you know, some stuff like that. Even if the movie doesn't do much with it, it's out there for a future movie to pick up. You know, and that's the kind of things you have to do if you're going to have an eye towards a sequel, like for this kind of setting. Because the other thing is, if you're looking at like, especially like the Marvel path, your sequel might not have these characters in it. It could have totally different characters, and you have to prime people for that possibility.
Yes.
As
A
opposed-
movie about Mort the Moneylender.
As opposed to your Lord of the Rings scenario where
Right.
you just kidnap 47 actors for 3 years and make them film 3 movies all at once.
Right.
Yeah, so if you want it to be sustainable, you have to assume that there's going to be characters coming and going. Maybe some movies with no carryover from the last movie as far as character development goes. So you have to be fluid enough to be able to roll with that if Chris Pine is busy doing the next Star Wars or whatever, whenever it's time to do
I
it.
wouldn't mind seeing them in Star Wars.
I think they're actually going to make another Star Trek as the current talk. So,
Did I say Star Wars?
Yeah.
I meant Star
but,
Trek.
but still, I mean,
I would watch Chris
he
Pine in
can
Star
find
Wars.
Star Wars.
I'd take Chris Pine in a G.I. Joe movie.
Yeah, Duke.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
I just think he's dreamy.
It's the eyes.
Yeah,
but yeah, so you got to.
I like the way he makes me giggle.
That's why you leave these pieces. You let the sequel do the heavy lifting, but you've got to put the pieces out there, you know. And you need to. The people need to understand that the world this takes place in doesn't exist just around this handful of characters and these two places they're going to go, or three, or whatever. They have to understand that there is the larger world, and it is filled with adventure and magic and this, that, and the other, you know, so that whenever you come up with your sequel that doesn't have these people, if they go that route, they're like, oh, okay, this is another Dungeons & Dragons movie, or this is a Forgotten Realms movie, or however you're going to brand it for the sequel, because, I don't know.
An example of this, other than the Marvel movies, would be your Critical Role for your live stream Dungeons & Dragons stream fans out there. So, Matt Mercer has created an entire world, very Tolkien-esque in that just the depth of lore and everything is outstanding. But now they're on their third campaign. Each time there's different characters. Now in each campaign there's been throwbacks, there's been hints about previous campaigns. There's even been a character or two, an NPC that's come up into the game from previous campaigns. But it's the same world, but the main characters every time are different.
Yeah. That's basically what I'm driving at. Is
Right.
That's the difference between like that, or like the Marvel movies versus say like the Mummy movies. You know, they're also fantasy action adventure, but very clearly they're about those characters, with the exception of the Scorpion King movie and its spin-offs. The prequel to the sequel to the remake.
I don't know how the spin-offs match up to the Mummy movies, though.
Yeah, I don't know either.
The first one does.
But all the three Mummy movies by themselves
Right.
are the same family, the same group of people, even though in the third one,
Yeah.
or the second one, or one of them, they had
third
to get a new...
Yeah. Rachel Weisz all of a sudden looked a little different, but
Right. It was Giancarlo.
I don't remember who it was offhand.
Somebody's not Rachel Weisz anymore.
Right, but the point is, it's that's what contained sequels look like. It's the same characters, the same setting. Whereas the Scorpion King only has one character from the others, the title character. It's clearly a spin-off that had its own sequels. You know, we're talking more like that, not in terms of quality, but hopefully, but you know that concept of use the movie to set the stage, but make sure everyone understands that there's more going on.
And how this may be different than that is that when they did the first Mummy or the second Mummy or whatever, I don't know that they had in mind that they were trying to create a universe.
Right. Yeah, that's probably
So that was the spin-off, the Scorpion King spin-off was just a way for them that they recognized the Rock's box office appeal.
potential. Yeah.
His
And
popularity period.
his popularity period, and they took off in a direction they thought they could make more money off of that. Kudos, more power to them. Whereas hopefully, this is a plan from the get to expand this one movie into something else. And they know that we've been let down so many times before, and they know that we have high expectations from the Lord of the Rings and the Wheel of Time and the Vox Machina and then the new Lord of the Rings things coming on, series is coming on Amazon Prime. They recognize that our bar is raising and that they want this to emulate the Marvel Universe and plan accordingly for that from the get. I hope they are doing that rather than just winging it with a Scorpion King spinoff down the road.
Right. Although on the flip side, I didn't even think about this until you started going there, but also using the Mummy as an example, The other more recent Mummy movie with Tom Cruise was supposed to be an attempt to start a combined universe. with all the
Universal dark
monsters.
movies.
Yeah,
With what?
the Universal monsters: the Mummy, Dracula,
Wolfman.
Oh, I didn't know
Frankenstein.
that. I
Yeah.
thought you at first I thought you were saying it was them trying to put that into the Mummy universe.
No, I think the only connection was you actually see the Book of the Dead on a shelf in the background somewhere. Just
But you're going to have that in
just a
any.
shout out, yeah.
But you're going to have that, even if that may be a shout out to the Mummy movies, the Brendan Fraser joint. But
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's not, but it doesn't have to be because the Book of the Dead should be common fodder for any
Right. No,
Egyptian
I mean,
horror movie.
like the prop from that with the lock.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
I see.
Yeah. Yeah. To your point, if it was any kind of yeah, it was meant to be the beginning of one. That's why, like, Russell Crowe's character is Dr. Jekyll, and Mr. Hyde, I believe he morphed into him at some point.
Right.
And like, I personally don't know where things went off the rails with that movie. I thought it was okay.
It was okay, but there was something. There's nothing that I can put my finger on specifically, but the whole thing left me leaving unfulfilled,
Yeah.
unsatisfied.
And so,
It wasn't the normal. Now, Tom Cruise is a crazy, crazy small man, but he's incredibly good at making good movies.
yeah.
And I normally leave off out of a Tom Cruise movie with a feeling of satisfaction. There was something about the Tom Cruise movie joint that I did not leave feeling satisfied.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a good story.
Yeah, I ended up watching it on TV. And
I like the
it was-
characters, like the casting.
Yeah.
I didn't have any problems necessarily with the story itself. The cinematography was dandy. Special effects were okay. It should have been good, but there was just something that wasn't there that should have been.
Yeah. So, to the D&D movie, like, hopefully the makers, like, examined that movie and figured out what went wrong.
Right?
Because that was a movie trying to do this. And like I said, the two of us, we can't put our finger on it.
But they get paid lots of money to do
Yes.
put their finger on things like that.
People who went to film school dissect this. So, but yeah. So it can go
And
wrong.
by the way, if you know what went wrong with that,
Yeah,
put it
drop
in the
some
comments.
Maybe we'll talk about that later on down the road. So yeah.
I do feel like there needs to be a Tom Cruise joint, the Mummy video watch party happening now. I mean, not necessarily on the YouTubes, but I mean we could do a reaction video after it. But
I've never actually seen it.
really,
Yeah.
Hmm.
I
it's not bad. I don't want to give the impression
when
that
they
it's
first
bad.
announced that they were making the Mummy, I was like, Mummy 4, Brendan Fraser, and then it was here's Tom Cruise, and I'm like, no.
I feel that. I get that. I get it.
How do you
So
think-
I
how-
just-
how do you think was it Boris Karloff fans feel about the Brendan Fraser movies?
Right.
That they're great.
I doubt.
Mm.
That's Boris Karloff fans are probably like 70 years old,
Oh, they're-
or older.
They were probably happy to take their grandkids to see the movie.
No offense to Secta, and octogenarians listening to this, if you happen to be.
Look at the brain on Bob.
I like older movies.
He likes older women, yeah.
Sometimes. But yeah, nothing wrong with older movies. They're just, we need to acknowledge that across the decades, movies are different.
Mm-hmm.
Not just ones in color, ones in black and white, but like, if you look at older movies, there's a number of them that assume you don't know what it's like to drive a car across town. Like, oh, we've got to go to the hotel. They don't just cut to the hotel like a modern movie does. They feel that you need to see them go out, get in the cab, tell the cab driver where to go, drive around with some B footage for a while, maybe some steer jerker scenes in the cab that don't have any context at all, and then get to the building, get out of the cab, then go check into the hotel. People know what all that's like. You don't have to film all that, but older movies show all that. And like I love the James Bond movies, but my God, he spends a lot of time checking in and out of hotels.
I
That's all
don't
I'm
think
saying.
I've watched the last 2 or 3 or 4 James Bond movies.
I watched the last one was on one of the stream. It was on Prime. It was good. You know,
I even like the Daniel Craig. I don't even know why I haven't watched them. I just haven't.
Let's see.
the only one, the Craig movies, like the second one was a little weak, but if you ever read up on it, it's because they had no script. They just
Was the
they
second
just
one where
started.
he was like running on a train, jump on a train, as his part of it was falling off behind him or something like that?
Maybe it's the one where they wind up in like the Chilean desert. Yeah, like the
Remember
people
that.
are after the water rights, and
I don't know that.
they're
The last one I saw, Daniel Craig was leaping on a train and doing all kinds of crazy shit.
yeah. Well, I like Casino Royale's good. Now this is me some Bond snobbery here. I don't think Bond would stoop to playing Texas Hold'em. Bond's like a Baccarat kind of guy. You know,
Yeah.
games that us Americans simply cannot contemplate how they function. You know,
He's too British.
They're throwing cards
He wasn't playing
around.
Baccarat?
No, it was like it was 5-card stud, right?
Well, that's
I
not,
think.
that's not Texas Hold'em.
Or, I don't know. So he's playing poker. It's one. I don't know which variant.
Like
But
anything related to Texas, you just walk away from.
yeah, so it's. I mean, I get it. Like it's the popular game at the time, you know. But Bond he's refined. He's you know
Well,
he
but
does
for
these
sure.
things.
James Bond plays Baccarat, for sure.
Yeah.
Unquestionably.
Or the one missile game from the one movie.
This-
The laser game. Where it's literally he had to hold on to the stuff and it was shocking him every time he lost health on it.
Oh, isn't that Never Say Never Again?
Possibly. I don't know.
The Sean Connery movie that's not part of the franchise. 'Cause
Possibly.
It's just a remake of Thunderball.
Possibly.
Yeah.
It's still a James Bond.
No, it's not.
He's still playing James Bond.
Technically, it is not a James Bond movie.
He's
It does
playing James Bond.
not- I don't care.
Well, that's
It does-
fine. You can play James Bond and not be a James Bond
Yeah,
movie.
it does not count.
You could make a movie where you played Gandalf, but it wouldn't be a Lord of the Rings movie.
Yeah. Yeah, that movie was actually released against a real James Bond movie. I want to say Moonraker, but I could be mistaken on that. It's one of the Roger Moore movies. Yeah, the theme songs are great. So those of you who haven't
Now,
ever seen
I
those movies.
love me some Sean Connery.
Yeah.
I thought Pierce Brosnan was James Bond when he was Remington Steele. I like Daniel Craig. And maybe it's just because this is the first James Bond that I knew, but to me, James Bond will always be Roger Moore.
Yeah, I mean, Roger Moore gets a lot of hate. He shouldn't. Like, the movies are a little more slapstick, and that I understand people not liking. But Roger Moore is awesome as James Bond, in my
Agreed.
opinion. Like Connery is my favorite Bond, but Roger Moore's number 2. Like, and it's close. You know, I just with Connery, one, obviously, he's the progenitor. He set the stage. He also has that again, the gallows humor going for him.
For
you know.
sure. Love Sean Connery. There's just, I think it's because he was already done being James Bond when I first found James Bond. And so when I saw him being James Bond, he didn't look like James Bond to me.
Yeah.
But when I saw Remington Steele looked like James Bond to me.
Yeah, I like Pierce Brosnan. I mean, you know,
I'm not even talking about the movies necessarily. I'm just talking about the casting. You know what I mean? I'm not talking about the quality of Pierce Brosnan joint compared to Sean Connery. That's not what I'm talking about.
well, I mean, my second favorite Bond movie is one of his.
Oh yeah?
The World Is Not Enough. I think that Brosnan should have ended on that one, not the next one where they were fighting the North Koreans.
Now see, I thought there was probably some script skipping going on there too.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Brosnan's, his whole run is basically defined by the fact that the Cold War is over. But in every one, we're still dealing with that. You know, the first one, it's Russian fallout. The second one, it's trying to get in war with the Chinese. The World Is Not Enough is dealing with fallout of the Soviets no longer controlling certain regions. And then the last one, whose name completely evades me right now, is about the North Koreans. So it's literally like, man, we really wish we still had the Russians
Well,
to fight.
that's the entirety of the James Bond series was
Oh,
the
yeah.
Cold War,
Yeah.
and that's what it was about. If you didn't have I mean, even
mean,
with us getting back to the Dungeons and Dragons movie, there will be many videos about many different movie franchises and movies in general.
Yes,
And most of those are going to be one video.
Yeah, well, we have actually talked about going into the Bond movies in depth, so I've had some time to think about it and watch the movies again.
For sure.
So yeah.
But for as far as this Dungeons and Dragons video goes, are we done?
Yeah, actually, let me tie this into the Bond movies real quick.
Well, you go, boy.
The Bond movies, from Connery through Brosnan, are one continuity,
Uh-huh.
but they're not very well connected.
Agreed.
There's literally only a handful of plot points that ever resurface. Oddly enough, the main one is from the one movie with George Lazenby. It's the fact that Bond was married.
I was going to say that earlier, wasn't he? No, you said that Sean Connery was the original Bond.
He is. Sean Connery was in 5 movies.
And then Lazenby?
He stepped back. Lazenby does one movie.
I thought Lazenby was the first one.
No, he was in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Telly Savalas is playing Blofeld.
Yeah.
But he gets married at the end of the movie. Blofeld machine guns his car, kills his wife. The next movie, Connery came back for Diamonds Are Forever, and that was the last movie he was in. And the movie opens with him trying to find Blofeld to kill him in revenge. And then 2 of the Roger Moore movies make reference to the fact he was married.
Okay, so
I'm getting. I'm getting.
I recognize that I'm the one that steered this ship off course this time.
You know, I'm getting back to where we're going with all this. And then one of the Dalton movies makes reference to it.
Okay.
Like this is the only so that's one of the only plot points that comes up. Whereas with the Daniel Craig movies, it's very clear these are sequels. Boom, 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 boom. Where it's one plot throughout. Okay, so the D&D franchise, if they're going to use the same actors, needs to model after the Craig movies, where it's clear it's a through line.
But we are of the opinion that they won't be able to use the same actors all the time, so they should use the other method.
Right. If you use the other method, there it would be like if they suddenly made a movie about Felix Leiter or Q or Moneypenny. All those things could happen because you've established it, and then you could take off. They didn't,
Right.
but you could. And so, yeah, I feel that that's probably going to be more where they go with it. You know, if you got to spin off characters, like look for what you already got. You know, in the those movies, Moneypenny's already primed to just take off if they wanted to. You know, so set up stuff like that. You know, I already edit all that out.
Well, right, but if you do that, though, then it becomes the other. Like, if you set up Michelle Rodriguez's character to spin off into the next movie, then you're still just...
Well, yeah, I mean, if you have to, like if
Yeah, but you don't have to.
Well, no, you don't have to. Like ideally,
But if you're going to use these same characters,
Yeah.
definitely set it up in the last movie.
yeah, set up that like
Even if it's 1 or 2 characters.
yeah, set up that like, hey, we're not all going to go retire now. You know, like on to the next adventure, crew, group, cabal, what have you. You know, don't have them all die, like Rogue One. Spoilers if you haven't seen that.
They did all die.
Yeah. And we're still getting an Andor series.
Yeah, I'm hoping that'll be good.
Yeah.
Really like the Obi-Wan.
Yeah, I thought Obi-Wan was good.
But as far as Dungeons and Dragons goes, this is it. Thank you for watching this 4-hour and 17-minute long video. We appreciate your continued support and attention. And just, you know, hit that thumbs up, subscribe, maybe share with your friends or something.
We always appreciate these things, and keep an eye out for more D&D related videos. Given that this movie doesn't come out until March, there should be at least 1, if not 2 more trailers, where we'll hopefully learn a little bit more about the plot, and we can actually make reasonable judgments on what we're hopefully going to see. So definitely keep an eye out for that. And
Cast
for other,
interviews that let tidbits slip.
Yeah, and for our other D&D videos just in general, because we do a number of those and plan to keep doing more. So keep tuning in, and you know, if there's anything you want to see, put in the comments. We'll see what we can do.
And in the meantime, in the near future, Gen Con, and more Gen Con.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
That will be the heavy topic for the next couple weeks, probably. So, thanks for watching. Okay. Well, they're going to learn a lot about James Bond.